is possible. I said your dream is possible. Elder Les Brown, as always, it's like the theme tune. Every good show has a theme tune. And Elder Les Brown and his motivational poise plays that role for breaking boundaries. Phenomenal, phenomenal message. Love the message. Can't get enough of the message. So, welcome to another episode of Breaking Boundaries, a talk show where we explore things related to current affairs and popular culture, behavior psychology, and relationship dynamics. But I warn you, I said once again, I must warn you, it gets a bit lively around here. So just take this into mind if you are a frail soul.
Disclaimer. Topics addressed in today's program may deal with sensitive issues. For example, struggles with mental health, structural racism, sexual behavior, or politically polarizing themes. Listener discretion is advised. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers, commentators, experts, guests, or host. They do not explicitly or necessarily reflect the channel's policy or founding principles. ECR cannot be held accountable for all or any views expressed.
Yes, shout out to the whole of the ECR family. Big shout out to Debbie Boo, Susie Q, to the ladies in the crew. Big up Mr. West, Ranks and Lacey Vice making a whole lot of trouble in the chat group last night when the boxing was going on. Outrageous fight. We're going to get into a little bit of that in a moment. But yeah, man, big up the whole of the ECR family.
Breaking Boundaries Talk Show with your host, Hugh Mayers. Sometimes controversial, often provocative, but always informative. You can call in to ask a question or share your opinion on 0782 611 5543.
Yeah, we most definitely look forward to that a little later on. But as I always like to ask favors of my peeps, I'm going to ask you a favor. If you haven't joined the Breaking Boundaries Facebook group already, then you still got opportunity to do that because you can get the uploads of the show. I've seen the work that's been going on IG. Lacey, I see you. I see what you're doing, brother. We can also, you can also follow me on X or Twitter, IG or TikTok. If you want to get clips of shows or make comments for future shows or just know what's going on and know what's good, you can follow us on any of those mediums on Hugh Mayers, HUGH. Mayers, and because we're cool like that, I'm gonna ask you for the favor. You know the favor already. Go in your WhatsApp, hit the ECR link, and share the chat show link with 3, 4, 5. You pick a number, at least 3 because it's free, right? 3 of your contacts. Put them on because it's gonna be a dynamic show today. Yeah. So let's jump straight into what's good. Congratulations to Daniel Dubois, right? Triple D, Dynamite Daniel Dubois, right? Or Daniel Dynamite Dubois, whichever way, but it's a Triple D for his 11th round stoppage and becoming a 2-time world champion, winning the WBO championship, heavyweight championship, taking a belt from Fabio Wardley. It was a brutal affair. It was a savage affair. It reminded us, if we needed reminding, how dangerous a sport boxing is, and that these guys. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of a conversation. Shout out to my brother Malik. I was having a conversation with my brother after the fight, and we were talking about people like Johnny Nelson and how he made it safety first in his boxing, and I think I used the phrase, his mama didn't raise no fool. We, for our entertainment as fans, we want to see guys go at it, but there is a price, because yesterday the fight was violent. It wasn't technical, as some fights are, but it was definitely brutal, heavily contested, heavy-handed, two heavy hitters, giving it their all. And those of us that love boxing, we love it for the fact that it's theatre with blood, right? There's always drama. And like when you go to watch a live performance in a theatre, it's not scripted in the way that anything, in the way that a movie is, where you could say cut and take. Anything can happen in theatre, right? And so there was a lot of talk about Daniel Dubois being a quitter or having a bit of quit in him. And I think the latter would be more accurate to say he has some quit in him, but I wouldn't say that he's a quitter, or he could never be a two-time heavyweight champion. That's just impossible. It's not just improbable, it's impossible. And I think there's a subtle mistake that they make when they psychologically profile this young man. So Daniel Dubois won, 11th round stoppage, brutal fight, violent fight. But let's get behind the scenes. So before the fight, Fabio Wardley was looking extremely confident. You saw him in the last minute press conference enjoying his moment as champion. It's interesting because he never won his championship in the ring by beating any particular champion, but they call them internet champions now, when after a certain type of performance, if the belt is vacant, they just say, all right, you can be champion now. It looks a little bit strange, and it puts a lot of pressure on, because it means you especially if it's your first time, you've never actually won a world title fight, or you've never been in a world title fight, but you're the champion. So it's a little bit strange. Happened to Lennox Lewis, but obviously Lewis pulled through and became undisputed. So he won a lot of heavyweight fights, title fights. But yeah, getting back to the main event. So the word on the wire was Daniel's got a little bit of quit in him. He's a big puncher, but he's got a little bit of quit in him. And when the going gets tough, he will fold. Wardley Harrison comes from white collar boxing, and if you don't know what that means, it means the boxing that takes place, not like the formal amateur boxing code, but it's like it came up as boxing in the city, where guys from the city who probably watched Fight Club and wanted to get a little bit of their repressed aggression out in a controlled environment decided to start taking up boxing, and they started to hold contests. And Fabio Wardley, the former champion, came through that rank. So he didn't have a formal amateur career. He had a few, a limited number of contests in the white collar scene. It's not heavily respected because, they don't produce Olympians or European champions, or it's not of that higher standard, right? It's just big guys or guys that will just give it a go, right? Everyday blokes that will just give it a go, right? So it's a different system, but he came through and he's really done well for himself. Accomplished a lot, and last night was his first loss, so he come through from that scene. But he's shown a number of occasions where he's been losing, or when he's been asked questions in the ring and having a very tough fight, that he could dig deep. Quite athletic. Technique is a little bit suspect because he doesn't have that amateur background, but he has a lot of heart and a lot of natural athleticism, punching power, speed, fast twitch, all of the rest. So he's been dining out on that for a little bit. And in contrast, the boys came through the full amateur system. I believe he boxed for GB, he boxed for England. So that means he was an amateur of a high status or quite accomplished. You box for your country, that means you're quite accomplished, right? Box internationally. So he's come through the whole international system. He's won the title before, but there's been a few times where he might have taken the knee. And not taking a knee for Colin Kaepernick, not in some sort of unity toward like a George Floyd moment. No, he took the knee because the going got tough. So people thought he was a quitter, but I think they didn't understand something about the boys. He will quit, right, or he will mentally fold in fights where he is not having an impact on the opposite fighter. He can't really land on them. He's losing and he's getting stung he's getting peppered. So he's getting outboxed. In them type of fights, he might mentally implode, but never really seen him quit against Big Baby Miller or Philip Ergovich or AJ, or in them kind of fights where it's a give and take, and as long as he can land and throw and hit, even if he's getting hit, he might keep getting up, or if he gets wobbled, he'll keep going. He won't mentally fold. He's kind of built like that. He can handle that. And so he got knocked down in the first round and the third round, but he kept going. And I think his technique saw him pull away and show his, what they call it, boxing pedigree, right? And then so he basically just softened and continued to soften. He continued to soften up Fabio Wardley, and there were the commentators that were saying the fight should have been stopped earlier, and everybody that I've spoken to about the fight says, that fight was brutal, and the referee could have saved him from himself, or his corner could have pulled him out. Man was talking on WhatsApp last night about was a referee from UKIP, because there's no rational or reasonable reason why he would see that type of brutality leveled in a fight. Or was the referee just enjoying the fight? Because they're fans as well in their own way. Like, he didn't want to see it stop because it was twists and turns and the drama and stuff like that. But I can tell you this for free, and I'm not a medical expert. I can tell you that fight has shortened Fabio Wardley's career in some respects. And what I mean by that, to qualify my statements, is if he had, going into that fight, the athletic capacity and the ability and the awareness and, the physical strength to say, have maybe 8 more fights at top level, right? After that fight, he might have 4 or 5 left in him, because that fight took a lot out of him and would have put mileage on the clock. It's very unlikely that he'll be the same fighter again. But that is the nature of the game. That is the nature of the sweet science. And like I said, respect to both fighters. And, these guys, they do put their lives on the line for our entertainment, and we have to take our hat off, because it's a noble sport. It's a noble sport, so it's not to be taken lightly. But we pivot away from the world of sport and we go into the world of entertainment. So if you recall, maybe about was it about 2 months back now? We're going on about 2 months ago. There was a furore at the BAFTAs, right? Anybody remember what the furore was about? A man with the Tourette syndrome, a man with a mental health condition called Tourette's, used the N-word when Michael B. Jordan and his colleague were receiving an award. And so it caused a lot of furore about the fact, not just the fact what happened, because he has a mental health condition. He couldn't really help himself. There were questions asked as, why was a microphone plastered so near to this guy in the first place? And, what was that about? Was that just an oversight, or is this some sort of wind up? People were asking a number of questions. But not only that, the fact that there were certain messages that were made on stage about free Palestine and talking about, oppression in different parts of Africa, and a kind of speech of solidarity made by one award winner. And it was edited from the replay, but the N-word fiasco was not. And so there has been a bit of pushback, but there was also a investigation by the BBC into it. And you could find out what actually happened. And I don't want you to take the cynical approach. Just think about it, yeah?
Remember this pro-Palestine remark the BBC cut out of the BAFTAs?
Those under occupation, dictatorship, persecution, and those experiencing genocide. You matter, your stories matter. For Nigeria, for London, the Congo, Sudan, free Palestine. Thank you.
The BBC has just concluded its own investigation into itself about the matter, and shocker, they found they've done nothing wrong. According to the BBC's Executive Complaints Unit, the cuts weren't made due to political reasons, but instead due to time constraints, which, to be honest, is total bullshit. The BBC conveniently didn't feel so constrained for time when it left in its remarks by John Davidson. On John's part, of course, he couldn't help what he said. But the BBC, on the other hand, they made a deliberate choice. They chose to remove a pro-Palestinian statement and keep in a racist one. If you're wondering why the BBC has been acting in this way, it probably has a lot to do with the recent Zionist coup launched against the BBC. Late last year, Michael Prescott, a former independent advisor to the BBC's Editorial Standards Committee, publicly quit, accusing the BBC of anti-Israel bias. This was used by the mainstream media to create the narrative that the BBC had a massive anti-Israel bias. And before you know it, the BBC boss at the time, Tim Davie, resigned. But what a lot of people have missed is that it was really an inside coup launched by this man, Robbie Gibb. Robbie Gibb serves as a non-executive executive director on BBC's board. The problem is that he's not apolitical. He's actually a partisan hack. He was appointed to the board in 2021 by Boris Johnson. He was also Theresa May's director of communications between 2017 and 2019. That alone should tell you everything you need to know. He's also one of the key figures behind the creation of GB News. Remember that open letter Prescott leaked to the press about the BBC's anti-Israel bias? Well, Robbie Gibb had made very similar complaints to the BBC board just a few weeks earlier. There have been so many examples of the BBC displaying anti-Palestinian bias, not anti-Israel bias. Like in 2024, when the BBC presented footage of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters attacking Dutch people, as if it was showing attacks by Dutch racists against Jews. The BBC has failed to invite some of the most prominent Jewish Israeli historians, like Avi Shlein or Ilan Pappé, or Martin Shaw, one of the most prominent genocide scholars in the country. When analysing the BBC's coverage of the genocide in Gaza, the Centre for Media Monitoring found the BBC gave Israeli deaths 33 times more coverage across articles than Palestinian deaths. It was also found to be more than twice as likely to interview an Israeli than a Palestinian. Before this Zionist coup, the BBC was already deeply biased towards Israel. Now, after this coup, we can only expect it to get even worse. Remember this...
So time constraints, yeah? Time constraints. Wow, that's very, very interesting. That is fascinating. It was investigating itself, and it found that just due to time constraints, but the irony that the N-word, it needed to stay in because it was time constraints, but not that kind of time constraints, you know? So, yeah, it's food for thought, and it does in some way reflect or tie into our main topic for today, which is they are taking all our role, Black Brits, and their assault on Hollywood, right? Comic Drewski has really pushed the envelope. He's a comic genius in my eyes, and he's done what comics are supposed to do, right? They are supposed to push the envelope and challenge us to think about things from a different perspective and sometimes confront uncomfortable truths, right? That's the role of the comedian. And a little bit after the break, I think it's only worthy because he's come out with this new viral skit. This is the same Drewski that did the Charlie Kirk's widow, right? He did a skit on Charlie Kirk's widow. And so we're going to look at that a little bit after the break. But I just want to give you another update as well. And this is something related to a topic we discussed on the Breaking Boundaries show a few weeks back. And it was a topic about racializing victimhood. How that can be problematic, or it shows as insincere, or it shows as questionable when, as opposed to worrying about what has happened to the victim and finding out and investigating who was a perpetrator of the said crime, or the alleged crime, should I say, people get more caught up. Some people get more caught up in who was the victim racially and who was the perpetrator racially, ethnically. And so it kind of muddies the water, and it only lends to kind of bias. So some weeks ago, back in April, a young lady came out of a nightclub in Epsom, and she woke up in the alleyway and basically made the accusation that she had been assaulted by a number of men that evening, or should I say that night, because it would have been Wednesday night into the early hours of the morning, so that into the Wednesday morning, right, into the AM. And by Thursday evening after office hours, a crowd had gathered in Epsom, blocking the high street. Missiles were thrown at police. There was a few arrests made from, but they were mainly youths. They were mainly young people, teenagers and guys in their early 20s, right? And, but the crowd were, and there was even a social media, like Poundland, Tommy Robertson type of guy. I can't recall the guy's name off the top of my head, but one of those type of guys, these sort of rabble rousers around protect the women sort of brigade, right? But they don't really care about women who haven't been they don't show the same concern or level of concern for the majority of women in Britain who are from white indigenous backgrounds and their assailants in sexual violence or physical violence or domestic violence are white indigenous perpetrators. They show less interest in protecting women in that context. But when a white woman is harmed by somebody from a sort of immigrant background or a person of color, they go buck wild and into overdrive about protecting the women. So it does seem like a little bit insincere. It does seem suspect, if I can put it that way. And so they were out. The brigade were out. The sort of UKIP fan base, the Reform Party fan base, the Restore Party fan base, that kind of personality type, right? Were out in force and saying, we are demanding answers from the police. They are hiding information from us. We need to know who were the perpetrators and we need to know their names. We want to know more. Police wasn't able to provide them with that evidence because they were still conducting their investigations. Lo and behold, it turns out a news article on the BBC website documents that, in fact, the young lady had been quite intoxicated. At least this is the official story, that she'd been quite inebriated and that she made her way into an alleyway of sort and fell over and had made a type of mistake that what she thought had taken place had not taken place. And obviously police have to carry out certain types of investigations, not just interviews, but, without being too graphic, but if somebody's claiming a certain type of assault, they'll have to have a medical of sort. And, one thing would have led to another, and it so transpired that no sexual assault had taken place at all. Not by 1, 2, 3, 4, or any number of men. No assault had taken place, which in a sense is a good thing, right? The main thing that stuck with me is that this lady is still receiving support, because it would seem that there is a bit of diplomacy in the article. There's a bit of diplomacy because she might not be okay. She might still need help in other ways. That type of thing might indicate that somebody is vulnerable for whatever reason. And so it's come out that basically it's not a phantom claim, or is it a mistake? Is it in good faith? I don't need to be the arbitrator of that, but I do want to emphasize the point of when we get into witch hunt politics and we're jumping in front of the putting the cart before the horse, it does lead to humiliating and embarrassing outcomes, because while things might hit people in a certain way, it does require a cool head. And it shows you how easily that the let's say there were people out there demonstrating in good faith, but the manipulators, there's the organ grinders, there's the guys that take the collections, that there are preachers of this sort of, if you will, theology, anti-immigrant theology. I'm using that word theology in a kind of parenthesis, right? And like false preachers, right? Like the false mystic. Yeah, they're still about one thing though. Remember to leave a donation. Remember to drop to drop something in the collection plate. But nowadays we have none. It's not like necessarily religious in the formal sense, but it's like tapping into that fervor, that religious fervor that people have within them. And instead of having a collection plate, it's not physical. It's a what do you call the thing again? Cash App, or there's different methods of collecting money. But somebody's out to hustle the British public. There's members of the British public that have resentment. There's members of the British public that have, maybe they got genuine questions about things to do with immigration and integration and assimilation and all these things. And there's nothing wrong with these conversations. But I think what the rabble rousers do is they just wind the people up who ain't too bright and basically take advantage and manipulate them. And this is a prime example of something of that nature taking place. The hustlers were, I call those guys, like we call them, there's a name they used to use on Fox News right? And they can happen, and you have them on either or any side of the divide. But they used to use this phrase on Fox News, are like race hustlers. You know what I'm saying? So you know what I mean? The race hustlers were out. They were doing their thing. They were trying to get bread and keep themselves relevant, keep themselves at the forefront. But really, it was just a woman who does need help, has issues, but it wasn't what was on the surface. So let that be a little bit of a lesson, for all of us when it comes to issues around jumping the gun and the issue of prejudice, prejudging. It's not only racial prejudice, but just prejudice in general. Sometimes we prejudge. But we're going to catch you after the break, where we'll take a look at the role of the comedian in society, pushing the envelope. See you after this.